The first thing Damien Whitmore bought from me was not my body, not my future, not even my name. It was my silence. The contract lay between us on the glass desk like a clean white blade, every page stamped with the Whitmore Global seal, every clause written in language so cold it made my hands feel numb. 42 floors below, Manhattan moved like nothing terrible was happening, yellow cabs sliding through rain, office lights blinking awake, people rushing home to dinners, dogs, warm kitchens, ordinary lives. I stood in a borrowed gray coat with one missing button, my sneakers still damp from the sidewalk, while my stepfather smiled beside me as if he had just negotiated the sale of an old car instead of the last piece of my life. "Ethan understands," Victor Hale said, his voice smooth with the kind of confidence men use when they have never paid for their own sins. "He is quiet. Obedient. Good with children. You will have no trouble with him." I wanted to tell him to stop speaking for me. I wanted to say that I was 22 years old, not furniture, not a debt payment, not an omega-shaped solution to someone else's problem. But the words stayed trapped behind my teeth because my mother's hospital bill was still unpaid, because Victor had made sure every escape route ended in a locked door, and because the man sitting across from me looked powerful enough to make the entire city hold its breath. Damien Whitmore did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He was dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than everything I owned, his dark hair perfectly controlled, his pale blue eyes fixed on the contract instead of on me. His scent was faint, cedarwood and winter air, the kind of clean sharpness that warned you not to come closer. He turned one page, then another, reading my life like quarterly earnings. "Mr. Hale," he said at last, "you told me your stepson agreed voluntarily." Victor's smile twitched. "Of course. Ethan wants what is best for his family." Damien's eyes finally lifted to mine. For one dangerous second, I forgot how to breathe. There was no softness there, no rescue, no pity. Just assessment. I had seen that look before in landlords. Debt collectors, doctors at free clinics who had too many patients and not enough time. It was the look people gave something inconvenient. "Do you agree?" he asked. My throat tightened. Victor's hand settled lightly on my shoulder, friendly to anyone watching, heavy as a warning to me. I looked at the pen waiting beside the papers. I looked at the rain streaking down the windows like the sky itself was trying to erase the room. Then I thought of my mother asleep under thin hospital blankets, asking me not to worry because things always worked out for good people. She had always believed that. I had stopped believing it years ago. "Yes," I whispered. Damien watched me for a moment longer, as if he heard the lie but had already decided not to challenge it. He slid the pen toward me. My signature looked small at the bottom of the page, a fragile scratch beneath all that expensive ink. Victor exhaled like a man freed from a cage, but I felt the bars closing around me. Damien stood, buttoning his jacket with calm precision. He was tall, broad-shouldered, every inch the alpha CEO people feared in newspapers and whispered about in elevators. "You will live in my house," he said. "You will follow my rules. You will not speak to the press, you will not contact Mr. Hale for money, and you will not expect kindness from me." The words should have hurt. Instead, they made something inside me go strangely still. Kindness had become a luxury I no longer expected from anyone. "What exactly am I supposed to do there?" I asked, my voice barely steady. For the first time, a shadow crossed his face, quick and private, gone before I could understand it. "You will care for my son," Damien said. "Nothing more." A son. The word changed the air. Victor had not told me about a child. Of course he had not. Men like him never mentioned the sharp parts until after you had already signed. Damien walked to the door, and two men in dark coats stepped aside as if the room itself belonged to him. "A car is waiting downstairs. You have 1 hour to collect whatever you need." I almost laughed, because everything I needed could fit into a backpack, and everything I loved was already beyond my reach. Victor leaned close as Damien turned away. Be grateful, Ethan, he murmured. Most people in your position do not get marble floors. I looked at him then, really looked, and for the first time that day, I did not feel afraid of him. I felt empty. Outside, Damien's assistant handed me a black umbrella and guided me toward a private elevator. The doors closed without a sound, sealing me inside my reflection, pale face, tired gray eyes, damp brown hair, and Omega sold under fluorescent lights and corporate signatures. As the elevator dropped, my stomach dropped with it, and I told myself not to cry. Not in front of strangers. Not where cameras could see. Not before I even reached the cage. But when the doors opened into the underground garage and I saw the long black car waiting, I understood with terrible clarity that my old life had ended upstairs, on the 42nd floor, with one signature and one Alpha's cold command. The car ride from Whitmore Tower felt longer than any road I had ever taken, even though the driver told me the estate was only 28 miles north of the city. Manhattan disappeared behind us in streaks of rain and glass, replaced by quiet highways, dark trees, and neighborhoods where every house sat far enough from the next that no one had to hear anyone else cry. I sat in the back seat with my backpack on my lap, my fingers curled around the worn canvas strap like it was the last familiar thing in the world. Inside were 2 sweaters, a phone with a cracked screen, my mother's old silver locket, and a sketchbook I had not opened in months. That was all I had been allowed to take. That was all my life had become. The driver did not speak unless spoken to, and Damien Whitmore sat beside me with an ocean of black leather between us, reading messages on his phone as if transporting a purchased Omega into his home was just another item on his schedule. His profile was sharp in the passing lights, calm and unreadable, the kind of face carved for boardrooms, not bedtime stories. I wanted to ask about his son. I wanted to know his name, his age, whether he understood why a stranger was being brought into his house. But Damien's final words in the office still hung between us like frost. You will not expect kindness from me. So I swallowed the questions and watched the rain crawl sideways across the window. Nearly an hour later, the car turned through iron gates so tall they looked like they belonged to a private museum. A long driveway curved between winter-bare maple trees, their branches scraping the gray sky like thin black fingers. Then the mansion appeared. White stone. Tall windows. A roofline sharp enough to cut the clouds. It was beautiful in the way expensive things could be beautiful without being welcoming. Every light glowed perfectly, every hedge was trimmed with military precision, every inch of the place announced wealth so loudly that it somehow felt silent. My breath fogged the window. This is where you live? I asked before I could stop myself. Damien did not look up from his phone. This is where my son lives. The answer was simple, but something about it made the house feel even colder. A house where a child lived should have had bicycles near the steps, chalk on the driveway, fingerprints on the glass. This place had none of that. It had marble stairs, black lanterns, and 2 staff members waiting under umbrellas as if we were arriving for a funeral. The front door opened before Damien touched it. Warm air rushed out, carrying the scent of polished wood, fresh lilies, and something sterile beneath it, like a hotel suite prepared for guests who would never stay long. An older woman in a navy dress stepped forward. Her silver hair was pinned tightly at the back of her head, and her eyes moved over me with careful politeness, not unkind, but not surprised either. Mr. Whitmore, she said. The East Wing is quiet tonight. Damien's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Mrs. Albright, this is Ethan Harper. He will be staying in the South guest room. See that he has what he needs. Not welcome him. Not help him settle. See that he has what he needs, as if I were a package requiring storage instructions. Mrs. Albright nodded, then turned to me with a softer voice. Come with me, Mr. Harper. The house swallowed my footsteps. The foyer rose 3 stories high, all white marble. And black iron, with a chandelier hanging overhead like frozen rain. There were no family photographs on the walls, no scattered shoes, no half-finished puzzles, no evidence that anyone here ever laughed too loudly or ran down the stairs in socks. We passed a formal sitting room no one seemed to use, a dining room with a table long enough for 20 people, and a hallway where my reflection followed me in dark polished windows. Every room was perfect. Every room felt untouched. Mrs. Albright led me up a wide staircase and along the south corridor. "Mr. Whitmore keeps a very structured household," she said carefully. "Breakfast is at 7. Lunch for the child is at noon. Dinner is served at 6, though Mr. Whitmore often works late. You are not to enter the East Wing unless instructed. You are not to disturb the private study. You are not to speak to reporters, guests, or business associates. If anyone asks, you are a temporary household companion." A household companion. The words felt almost elegant until I understood what they were hiding. "And his son?" I asked. Mrs. Albright stopped outside a bedroom door. For the first time, her expression changed. Not much, just a small crack of sadness around her mouth. "Noah is 5, she said. "He is a good boy." She hesitated, lowering her voice. "He has had a difficult year. Afraid to touch the ashes." I did not sleep much that first night. The south guest room was larger than the entire apartment I had grown up in, with a bed wide enough for 3 people, thick cream curtains, and a bathroom where the towels were warmed on silver racks. Everything smelled faintly of lavender soap and expensive detergent, but beneath the comfort was a strange emptiness that pressed against my chest. I lay on top of the blankets in my clothes, listening to the house breathe. Pipes whispered inside the walls. Rain ticked softly against the window. Somewhere far away, a clock chimed every hour in a voice too deep for the dark. I kept thinking about the crash from the hallway, the way everyone had frozen, and the way Damien had ordered us to leave it alone. By morning, my eyes burned, but I washed my face, put on the clean white shirt Mrs. Albright had left folded on a chair, and followed the smell of coffee downstairs. Breakfast was served in a room with tall windows facing a wet garden. Damien sat at the head of the table, already dressed in another black suit, reading from a tablet while untouched toast cooled beside his plate. He did not greet me. Mrs. Albright placed a cup of coffee in front of me and nodded toward the chair near the middle of the table, neither close to Damien nor too far away. I sat carefully, afraid even the silverware had rules I did not know. For several minutes, there was only the soft sound of rain and Damien swiping his finger across the screen. Then a small voice did not come, but a small presence did. Noah Whitmore entered the breakfast room holding Mrs. Albright's hand. He was smaller than I expected, with soft black hair that fell over his forehead and pale blue eyes so much like Damien's that it startled me. He wore a navy sweater, gray pants, and little house slippers shaped like bears, but there was nothing playful in his expression. His face was calm in a way no 5-year-old's face should have been calm. Not peaceful. Empty. He looked at his father first. Damien's eyes lifted, and for one brief second his whole face changed, not enough for anyone careless to notice, but enough for me. The ice thinned. Then Noah looked at me. Mrs. Albright's hand tightened around his, perhaps expecting him to turn away or hide, but he did neither. He simply stared, quiet and unblinking. "Good morning, Noah," Damien said, his voice lower than it had been with me. Noah did not answer. Mrs. Albright led him to the chair nearest his father, where a plate of sliced strawberries, toast strips, and scrambled eggs had been arranged into a careful smiley face. Noah looked at the plate without interest. Damien set his tablet down. "Eat 3 bites." Noah's fingers closed around the cuff of his sweater. "Noah," Damien said, and there was a tired edge under the command, the sound of a man who had tried every softer option before deciding softness did not work. The child's shoulders rose toward his ears. I knew that motion. I had done it myself in rooms where adults spoke like doors slamming. Without thinking, I reached toward the center of the table and picked up one toast strip from my own plate. These look like tiny bridges, I said quietly, not directly to Noah, not asking anything from him. I used to make them when I was little. Strawberry cars, toast bridges, egg mountains. Mrs. Albright went still. Damien's gaze cut to me, sharp as winter sunlight. I waited for him to tell me to stop. He did not. Noah's eyes shifted from my face to the toast in my hand. I stood slowly, careful not to move too fast, and placed the toast strip across the rim of my plate. Then I pushed a strawberry slice beneath it like a little red car. "This one is stuck in traffic," I whispered. Noah did not smile. But he looked. For almost a full minute, he looked. Then, very carefully, he picked up a piece of toast from his own plate and laid it across his eggs. Mrs. Albright covered her mouth with one hand. Damien did not move at all. The room felt as if it had forgotten how to breathe. After breakfast, Mrs. Albright took me to a playroom on the second floor, explaining that Noah spent most mornings there with his learning specialist, though the specialist had recently resigned. The playroom was bright, filled with expensive toys arranged in perfect labeled bins, but it had the same untouched feeling as the rest of the house. Noah sat on the rug beside a wooden train set, silently trying to connect two broken pieces of track. They did not fit. He tried again. Then again. His small hands began to tremble. I lowered myself onto the rug several feet away, close enough to be present, far enough not to trap him. "Sometimes tracks need a different piece," I said gently. I picked up a curved section and set it near him without touching his hand. Noah stared at it. Then he took it, fitted it into place, and the track finally closed into a circle. The smallest sound escaped him, not a laugh, not a word, but something alive. I felt it like sunlight through glass. From the doorway, Damien watched us with one hand resting against the frame, his face unreadable, but his eyes fixed on his son as if he were seeing a door open that he had believed was sealed forever. By the third evening, I had learned the rhythm of the Whitmore mansion the way a frightened person learns the sound of footsteps outside a locked door. Breakfast was quiet, lunch was quieter, and dinner felt like a ceremony held for people who had forgotten why they gathered. The staff moved with careful grace, plates appeared and disappeared without clatter, and Damien sat at the head of the long dining table with the stillness of a man carved from winter. Noah sat to his right, small and straight-backed in his chair, his little hands folded in his lap as if someone had taught him that children should take up as little space as possible. I sat halfway down the table, exactly where Mrs. Albright had placed me, not family, not staff, not guest. Something in between. The chandelier above us turned every glass into a cold star. Outside the tall windows, rain had stopped, leaving the garden silver under the porch lights. For the first 10 minutes, no one spoke. Damien cut a piece of roasted chicken into neat, precise bites, then pushed Noah's plate closer to him. "3 bites," he said. Noah stared at the food. His face stayed calm, but I saw the tiny movement of his fingers twisting the hem of his sweater. I looked down at my own plate and tried not to interfere. I had already been warned twice that day, once by Mrs. Albright with kind eyes and once by Damien with a voice so flat it made kindness impossible to imagine, that Noah needed structure, not indulgence. But structure did not make a child feel safe. Structure did not teach a lonely 5-year-old how to be hungry again. Noah lifted his fork, then set it down without eating. Damien's jaw tightened. Noah. The name was not loud, but it carried across the table like a door closing. Noah flinched so slightly that only someone used to hiding fear would have noticed. I noticed. Before I could stop myself, I reached for the small bread roll beside my plate and tore off a piece. "When I was little," I said softly, keeping my eyes on the bread instead of on Damien, "my mother used to tell me that bread tasted better if you gave it a job. This one is a tiny moon." I rolled the piece gently between my fingers, then placed it on the edge of my plate. "It has to guard the mashed potato mountain." Silence fell even deeper. Somewhere behind me, a server stopped breathing. Damien's eyes lifted to me, pale and warning. I should have stopped. Any sensible person would have stopped. But Noah was looking at the bread. Not at the floor. Not through the window. At the bread. I tore another piece and set it beside the first. This one is the moon's very serious assistant. For one impossible second, nothing happened. Then Noah reached for his own bread roll. His movements were slow, cautious, as if he expected the table to punish him for wanting something. He tore off a small piece, smaller than mine, and placed it near his carrots. Mrs. Albright pressed one hand lightly to her chest. Damien went completely still. Noah picked up one carrot slice and moved it beside the bread. A tiny orange house under a tiny bread moon. My throat tightened so hard it hurt. That is a good house, I whispered. Noah's gaze flickered to me. His lips parted. Damien's fork touched his plate with a sharp sound. Ethan, he said. Just my name. Just a warning. I lowered my hands at once, heat rushing to my face. I am sorry. I expected Noah to retreat into himself again. Instead, he pushed his chair back. The legs scraped softly against the polished floor, and every person in the room froze. Noah climbed down carefully, still holding the small piece of bread in one hand. He walked around the long table, past Damien, past the empty chairs, past the silver bowls and crystal glasses, until he reached me. I did not move. I barely breathed. He stood beside my chair, his blue eyes lifted to my face, solemn and searching. Then he placed the bread moon in my palm, curled both of his small hands around my fingers, and said in a voice rough from disuse, "Mommy." The world stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. Mrs. Albright made a broken sound behind me. A glass slipped from someone's hand and landed on the carpet with a soft thud. My heart seemed to strike once, hard, and then forget what it was made to do. Damien rose from his chair so abruptly that the silverware trembled. His face had gone pale beneath its perfect control. "Noah," he said, but this time his voice was not a command. It was almost fear. Noah did not look at him. He stepped closer to me and pressed his forehead against my sleeve, trusting me with a certainty I had done nothing to deserve. I looked at Damien, helpless, my hand still open beneath that tiny piece of bread. I expected anger. I expected him to drag the moment back into silence by force of will alone. But Damien only stared at his son as if the child had spoken from the far side of a locked room, and for the first time since I had met him, the cruel Alpha CEO looked utterly lost. After Noah called me that impossible word, the house changed without moving a single piece of furniture. The walls were still white, the floors still shone like frozen water, and Damien Whitmore still carried himself like a man who could command a room into silence with one breath. But silence no longer obeyed him completely. It cracked in small places. It cracked when Noah reached for my sleeve at breakfast instead of staring through his plate. It cracked when he followed me into the playroom with his wooden train tucked under one arm, waiting for me to sit on the rug before he would touch the tracks. It cracked when Mrs. Albright began leaving 2 mugs of cocoa on the side table at 3 in the afternoon, one small and lukewarm for Noah, one full of cinnamon for me, though she pretended it was a kitchen mistake every time. Damien noticed all of it. Of course he did. Men like him built empires by noticing what other people missed. At first, he tried to restore order. On Monday, he told Mrs. Albright that Noah's meals were to be taken in the nursery again. Noah sat at the tiny table upstairs, looked at the untouched soup in front of him, and did not move for 45 minutes. When Mrs. Albright finally brought me in, he took 3 bites only after I sat on the floor and read the label on a box of crayons as if it were the most important document in the world. On Tuesday, Damien hired a new child therapist from the city, a kind woman with soft shoes and a leather folder. Noah listened to her introduction, then walked behind my chair, hid his face against my back, and stayed there until she quietly packed her things. On Wednesday, Damien himself came to the playroom and said, "Noah, come here." The boy looked at his father with those pale blue eyes, full of love and fear tangled too tightly to separate, but his hand stayed wrapped around my finger. I felt Damien's gaze on that small connection. It was not jealousy exactly. It was something sadder. Something like a man standing outside his own home, watching warm light through a window he no longer knew how to open. That night, rain returned. It struck the windows hard, driven by wind from the north, turning the mansion into a ship caught in dark water. Noah woke crying without sound. I found him curled on the floor beside his bed, his stuffed rabbit clutched so tightly its patched ear bent under his cheek. The nursery was beautiful, painted pale blue with silver stars on the ceiling, but it felt too large for one small child and too clean for any real comfort. I sat beside him, not touching at first. "It is just rain," I whispered. "It sounds big because this house has too many windows." Noah's breath hitched. I reached for the rabbit and straightened its ear. Mr. Rabbit is not scared. He is only offended because the thunder interrupted his important meeting. Noah looked at me through wet lashes. Meeting? The word was so quiet I almost missed it, but it was there, fragile and real. My heart swelled painfully. "Very important," I said. He was deciding whether carrots should be breakfast food or dessert. Noah's mouth trembled, not quite a smile, but close enough to feel like sunrise. I began telling him a story about a rabbit who became mayor of a garden and passed a law that every child had to receive one extra blanket on stormy nights. By the time I finished, Noah had crawled into bed, one hand still holding my sleeve. I stayed beside him until his breathing evened out. When I finally stood, I found Damien in the doorway. He wore no suit jacket, only a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, and for once he looked less like a CEO and more like a father who had been wandering lost in his own hallway. "How did you do that?" he asked. His voice was low, not cold, just exhausted. I looked back at Noah, asleep under a blanket covered in tiny moons. I did not do anything special. Damien's eyes remained on his son. He has not spoken during a storm in 11 months. The words entered the room softly, but they carried the weight of something buried. I should have stayed quiet. I should have remembered the contract, the rules, the distance between us. Instead, I said, maybe he was waiting for someone to stop treating his fear like a problem to solve. Damien's face closed at once, but not before I saw the wound beneath it. For a moment, the air between us filled with cedarwood, rain, and all the things neither of us knew how to say. Then he turned away. "Do not mistake usefulness for belonging, Ethan." The words were sharp enough to leave a mark, but his voice was not as steady as he wanted it to be. I watched him disappear down the hall, and for the first time, I wondered whether Damien Whitmore was cruel because he felt nothing, or because he felt too much and had no idea where to put the pain. The next morning, Damien left before sunrise. I knew because I heard the quiet hum of the garage door from my bedroom window and saw the sweep of headlights glide across the wet driveway before disappearing between the black maple trees. The mansion felt different without him, not warmer exactly, but less tense, as if every room had been holding its shoulders up and finally lowered them by half an inch. Noah ate 2 pieces of toast at breakfast and arranged his strawberries into the shape of a rabbit without being asked. Mrs. Albright nearly cried into the coffee pot. By late morning, the clouds had thinned, leaving the sky a pale, washed-out blue, and Noah wanted to show me the indoor greenhouse attached to the back of the estate. It was the first thing he had asked for with more than one word. "Plants," he said, standing in the playroom doorway with his wooden train in one hand and his stuffed rabbit in the other. "You want to see the plants?" I asked. He nodded. Mrs. Albright hesitated when I told her, her eyes flicking toward the east side of the house. "The greenhouse is connected through the rear gallery," she said carefully. "Do not take the east corridor." I promised I would not, and I meant it. But the Whitmore mansion was built like a beautiful maze by someone who trusted architecture more than people. One hallway curved into another. A service door that should have led to the garden opened into a narrow passage lined with covered furniture. Noah walked ahead of me with the confidence of a child who knew the house by instinct, and I followed, too relieved by his quiet curiosity to question the route soon enough. Then he stopped before a pair of white double doors. Unlike the rest of the house, these doors were not polished. A faint line of dust gathered along the panels, and the brass handles had darkened from disuse. Noah's hand lifted, but he did not touch them. "Mommy room," he whispered. The word struck the air so softly that for a second I thought I had imagined it. My pulse slowed. "Noah," I said gently, kneeling beside him. "We do not have to go in." He looked at me, then at the doors, and his little face folded with an old sadness no child should know. Before I could reach for him, the door shifted inward. It had not been locked. Cold air breathed out. Not cold like winter, but cold like a room sealed too long from life. Noah took one step inside. I should have taken him away. I should have remembered Mrs. Albright's warning, Damien's rules, the dangerous weight of places grief has claimed as sacred. But Noah was not running, not shaking. He was walking as if he had been trying to return here for a year and had finally found someone who would not drag him away. So I followed. The room beyond was a sitting room, flooded with soft gray light from tall windows overlooking the garden. White sheets covered most of the furniture, but not everything. On the mantel stood a silver-framed photograph of Damien holding a younger Noah on his lap, and beside them was a man with gentle brown eyes, sandy blonde hair, and a smile so open it made the whole room feel warmer even from a picture. He was beautiful in a quiet way, not polished, not untouchable, but alive. His hand rested over Noah's tiny fingers. Damien was looking at him instead of the camera. I understood before Noah said anything. This was the person who had filled the house before silence moved in. On a small table near the window sat a wooden music box shaped like a carousel. Noah reached for it with trembling hands. He played it, he whispered. My chest tightened. "Your mommy." Noah nodded. I did not correct him. I would never correct a child's love. I turned the little brass key, and a thin melody spilled into the room, delicate and trembling, like sunlight trying to remember how to enter. Noah leaned against my side, his head barely touching my arm. I did not move. I looked again at the photograph, at Damien's unguarded face, and something painful opened inside me. He had not always been made of ice. Someone had once known how to make him smile. Someone had once stood in this room and taught Noah that home could sound like music. His name was Caleb, Damien said from the doorway. I turned so quickly the music box nearly slipped from my hand. Damien stood in the entrance, still in his black overcoat, rain darkening the shoulders, his expression unreadable except for his eyes. Those were not cold now. They were devastated. Noah stiffened against me. I lifted my hand slowly away from the music box. I am sorry, I said. We got lost. I did not mean to come in here. Damien's gaze moved from me to Noah, then to the photograph on the mantel. For a long moment, he said nothing. Caleb hated locked doors, he said at last, his voice low and distant. He said a child should never grow up in a house with rooms he was afraid to enter. The words broke something in the silence. Noah's small hand found mine. Damien saw it. Pain crossed his face so quickly it was almost gone before it appeared. He died last spring, Damien said. A car accident on the way back from Noah's preschool recital. Noah was with him. The room seemed to tilt. I looked down at the little boy leaning against me, at the stuffed rabbit clutched under his arm, at the eyes that had learned too early that love could vanish between one moment and the next. My throat burned. Damien looked at me then, and the anger I expected was not there. Only fear. That is why I told you not to get close, he said. Not because I wanted to be cruel. Because my son has already lost one person he called mommy, and I do not know how to survive watching him lose another. For 2 days after we entered Caleb's room, Damien did not push me away. He did not pull me closer either, but in that house, where distance had been treated like law, even the absence of rejection felt like a fragile kind of mercy. Noah began carrying the music box from room to room, turning the tiny brass key whenever the silence became too heavy. Sometimes Damien would stop at the edge of the playroom, listening to the thin carousel melody with an expression that made him look years younger and unbearably tired. He still spoke in careful sentences. He still left before breakfast and returned after dark. But once, when Noah fell asleep against my side on the library couch, Damien came in with a blanket and placed it over both of us without saying a word. I pretended not to notice the way his hand paused near my shoulder before withdrawing. I pretended not to feel how badly I wanted him to stay. That illusion ended on Friday afternoon when 3 black cars rolled through the front gates and stopped before the mansion like a line of polished threats. I was in the playroom helping Noah build a city from wooden blocks when Mrs. Albright entered with her face drawn tight. "Mr. Whitmore has a guest," she said, though the careful way she spoke made the word guest sound like warning. "He would like Noah dressed for the sitting room." Noah's hand froze over a red block. No, it was small, immediate, and certain. I looked at Mrs. Albright, then back at him. "Who is here?" Before she could answer, the sound of heels crossed the marble hallway downstairs, crisp and confident, followed by a woman's bright laugh that did not belong in a grieving house. When we descended, Damien stood near the fireplace in the formal sitting room, his posture stiff enough to tell me he had not invited comfort inside with her. The woman beside him was elegant in a cream-colored coat, with golden hair arranged in perfect waves and a diamond ring flashing on her right hand. She looked like every magazine photograph of power I had ever seen, beautiful, expensive, and trained to smile without warmth. Her eyes moved from Damien to Noah, then to me, and stayed there. "So this is the temporary companion," she said. Damien's voice cooled. "Celeste." She laughed softly. "What? That is the phrase your legal team used, is it not?" She crossed the room toward Noah and lowered herself with the practiced grace of someone performing kindness in front of an audience. "Hello, sweetheart. I am Celeste Monroe. Your father and I are old friends." Noah stepped behind my leg. Her smile tightened for half a second, then returned brighter than before. "Shy. How precious." Damien's eyes flicked to Noah's hand clutching my sweater, and something in his jaw shifted. "Noah does not need to perform for guests." Celeste stood, smoothing her coat. "Of course. I only thought we should begin getting familiar. If the merger proceeds, people will expect a united family image. The board is already asking questions, Damien. They want stability. Investors adore stability." The word family sounded strange in her mouth, like a brand strategy. I lowered my gaze, reminding myself that I had no place in this conversation. I was a signed contract, a borrowed presence, a person the house could deny whenever necessary. Celeste seemed to know it too. She moved closer, her perfume sharp and floral, almost drowning the softer scent of the room. "Ethan, is it?" she asked. I nodded. "You have done a lovely job helping the child adjust." "Truly. But children become attached to routines, not people. Once a more appropriate arrangement is in place, I am sure Noah will transition." Noah's fingers dug into my sweater. I felt the tremor run through him. Damien said her name again, lower this time. She ignored the warning. "You understand, do you not? A purchased Omega cannot be allowed to confuse himself with a parent." The room went silent. Heat rushed to my face, but I kept my eyes down because pride was expensive, and I had never been able to afford much of it. Then Noah moved. He stepped out from behind me, small and pale, still holding his stuffed rabbit in one arm. His voice was thin, but this time it did not break. "He is not purchased." Celeste blinked. Mrs. Albright covered her mouth. Damien went completely still. Noah reached back and took my hand with both of his. He is Ethan. My chest hurt so badly I could barely breathe. Celeste's smile vanished for one unguarded second, revealing something hard beneath the polish. Noah, sweetheart, you are confused. Noah shook his head. She is not mommy. The word landed like a match in dry air. Celeste's eyes sharpened. Damien inhaled once, slow and dangerous, but his voice remained controlled. That is enough. Celeste turned toward him, startled by the finality in his tone. Damien, do not be sentimental. You know what is at stake. He looked from her to Noah, then to me, and for the first time, he did not look away when the room noticed. Yes, he said quietly. I am beginning to. Celeste's face hardened, but before she could answer, the front door chime echoed through the mansion. A moment later, a staff member appeared at the sitting room entrance, uneasy and pale. Mr. Whitmore, he said, there is a man at the gate asking for Mr. Harper. He says his name is Victor Hale. My blood turned cold. Noah's hand tightened around mine, and across the room, Damien's eyes changed from grief to something far more protective. Victor Hale. Arrived in a tan overcoat that had once been expensive, smiling like a man who believed every door in the world would eventually open if he leaned on it long enough. He stood in the front hall beneath the chandelier, rain shining on his shoulders, his eyes moving over the marble floors, the tall windows, the quiet staff, and finally landing on me with the same greedy satisfaction he had worn in Damien's office. Ethan, he said warmly, as if we were family in any way that mattered. You look comfortable. Noah pressed closer to my side. I felt his small hand tremble inside mine, and that tremor did more to steady me than any courage of my own. Damien stood between Victor and the rest of the room, still and controlled, but the air around him had changed. His cedarwood scent sharpened, not overwhelming, just unmistakably present, a silent warning that even Celeste seemed smart enough to respect. Mr. Hale, Damien said. You have no appointment. Victor gave a soft laugh. No, but I have unfinished business. I tried calling your office, but your assistant seems confused about priorities. His gaze slid to me again. I came to collect what is mine. The word struck the room like dirty water thrown across clean glass. Mrs. Albright stiffened. Celeste's eyebrows lifted with interest, as though a private embarrassment had become public entertainment. Damien did not move. Ethan is not yours. Victor sighed, opening a leather folder and removing several pages. That is a touching sentiment, but legally inconvenient. The original debt agreement was separate from the household contract. I transferred his service rights to you for a payment that covered only a portion of what his family owes. Now, unless you are prepared to settle the remaining balance, he returns with me until another arrangement is made. For a moment, all I heard was the rain outside. Service rights. Another arrangement. The phrases made my stomach turn, not because they were surprising, but because they sounded so ordinary in Victor's mouth. He had always known how to make cruelty look like paperwork. Damien took the documents, scanned the first page, and his expression darkened. Celeste stepped forward. Damien, this is exactly why I warned you. People like this bring complications. Pay him quietly and end the spectacle. I felt Noah's hand tighten. He looked up at me, wide-eyed, silently asking a question I did not know how to answer. Was I leaving? Would I vanish like Caleb? Would everyone simply stand there while the house went cold again? Panic rose in my chest, but beneath it came something clearer. I could not let Noah watch another person he cared about be pulled away in fear. I bent down and brushed his hair gently from his forehead. I need you to stay with Mrs. Albright for a minute, I whispered. Noah shook his head at once. No, I am not disappearing, I said, though I did not know if it was true. I just need to speak. Mrs. Albright came to him with tears in her eyes, and after one last desperate look at me, Noah let her hold his shoulders. I stood straight and faced Victor. My voice was not loud, but for the first time in years, it was mine. You do not get to sell me twice. Victor's smile thinned. Ethan, do not embarrass yourself. You embarrassed yourself when you called debt love and control responsibility. My hands were shaking, but I did not hide them. I signed because I was scared. I signed because you trapped me. But fear is not consent. The hall went silent. Damien looked at me, and there was something in his eyes I had never seen before, not pity, not possession, but respect so sharp it almost hurt. Victor's face hardened. Careful. Your mother still needs help. The old threat found its target. My breath caught. Damien stepped forward then, not with violence, not with anger loud enough to frighten Noah, but with the calm authority of a man who had finally chosen where to stand. Your contact with Ethan's mother ended 20 minutes ago, he said. Her medical bills have been transferred to a private trust in her name. You have no access to it, no signature authority, and no leverage. Victor stared at him. You had no right. I had excellent attorneys. Damien handed the papers to his assistant, who had appeared silently near the doorway. Review everything Mr. Hale brought. Then prepare a complaint for coercion, financial abuse, and fraudulent contract practices. Victor's color drained. Celeste whispered, Damien, this will become public. Damien did not look at her. His eyes stayed on me. Then let it become public. Something inside me broke open, not from pain this time, but from relief so sudden my knees nearly gave way. Victor backed toward the door, his confidence unraveling with every step. You will regret this, he said. Damien's answer was quiet. No. I regret waiting this long. The front door closed behind Victor, and the mansion seemed to exhale. Noah tore free from Mrs. Albright and ran to me, wrapping his arms around my waist with all the strength in his small body. I held him carefully, my eyes burning. Across the hall, Damien watched us, no longer hiding behind coldness. Celeste stood beside him with her perfect coat and useless diamond, finally understanding that the merger, the image, and the old rules were no longer the strongest things in the room. Noah lifted his face from my sweater and reached one hand toward his father. For one suspended second, Damien looked afraid to accept it. Then he crossed the marble floor, knelt beside us, and took his son's hand as if it were the most fragile promise in the world. By the time Victor Hale disappeared beyond the gates, the rain had softened into a mist that blurred the world outside the windows, turning the driveway lights into pale gold halos. Inside the mansion, no one moved for several seconds. Noah stood between Damien and me, one hand in mine and one hand in his father's, his small body creating the first honest bridge that house had known in a long time. Celeste was the first to break the silence. She laughed once, but it came out thin and brittle. You are making an emotional mistake, she said. The board will not like uncertainty. Damien looked at her as if he were finally seeing the shape of a life he no longer wanted. The board can survive disappointment. Her mouth tightened. And the merger? Cancelled. The word was calm, absolute, and clean. Celeste stared at him, then at me, as if searching for the moment when a purchased Omega had become powerful enough to change the future of Whitmore. Global. She did not find it, because power had never been the point. Noah squeezed my fingers. Damien noticed. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat and removed the folded household contract, the one that had brought me here, the one with my frightened signature at the bottom. For a moment, he simply held it. Then he looked at me. This should never have existed. My throat tightened. Damien. He shook his head, not harshly, but with a quiet grief. No. I called it order because I was afraid of hope. I called it protection because I was afraid my son would love someone I could not keep safe. And I let you stand in this house as if you owed me obedience for a debt that was never yours. He tore the contract once, then again, the sound sharp in the marble hall. Paper fell in pale pieces between us. I had imagined freedom so many times, but never like this. Not as a door thrown open. Not as a man kneeling in front of his child with broken paper at his feet and tears he refused to hide shining in his eyes. Damien turned to Noah first. "I am sorry," he said, his voice unsteady in a way that made Mrs. Albright quietly begin to cry. "I was so scared of losing you that I made this house too cold for you to live in. I thought if nothing changed, nothing else could be taken from us." Noah looked at him for a long moment, serious and small, then lifted his stuffed rabbit and pressed it against Damien's chest. "Rabbit forgives you," he whispered. Damien closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, he was smiling through pain. "That is very generous of Rabbit." A tiny laugh escaped Noah, so sudden and bright that every person in the hall seemed to feel it at once. It was not a big sound. It was not enough to erase grief or rebuild the past. But it was alive, and in that house, alive was a miracle. Celeste left without another word, her heels fading down the front steps into the mist. No one followed. Later that evening, after the attorneys had called, after Mrs. Albright had made soup because she said emotional revolutions required warm food, after Noah had fallen asleep on the library couch with his head in my lap and his hand still wrapped around Damien's thumb, the house felt different. Not fixed. Real things did not heal that quickly. But different. The fireplace was lit. Caleb's music box sat on the table, open and turning slowly, its small carousel horses moving in gentle circles while the old melody filled the room. Damien stood near the mantel, looking at the photograph of Caleb, Noah, and the man he used to be. "I thought loving again would betray him," he said quietly. I looked down at Noah's sleeping face. "Maybe love does not replace anyone. Maybe it just makes the house big enough to hold everyone who mattered." Damien turned toward me. The coldness was gone from his eyes, leaving something raw, careful, and honest. "You are free, Ethan. Your mother is safe. Victor cannot touch you. You do not have to stay." The words should have been easy. I had dreamed of being allowed to leave, of owning my own steps again, of waking up without rules written by someone else. But when I looked around the library, at the fire, the music box, the child sleeping against me, and the alpha who had finally stopped pretending grief was strength, I did not see a cage anymore. I saw a home still learning how to be warm. "If I stay," I said, my voice soft, "it cannot be because of a contract." Damien crossed the room slowly and knelt beside the couch, careful not to wake Noah. "Then stay because you are wanted. Stay because you are respected. Stay because one little boy already chose you, and because his father is asking for the chance to choose you properly too." My eyes burned, but this time I let the tears fall. Noah stirred, blinking sleepily, and looked between us. "Mommy stays?" he asked. I brushed his hair from his forehead and smiled through the ache in my chest. "Yes," I whispered. "Mommy stays." Damien bowed his head until his forehead rested lightly against our joined hands, and for the first time since I entered the Whitmore mansion, the silence around us was not empty. It was peaceful.